Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this horror movie review as part of my summer horror movie series for the month of July. So today we're going to take a look at a slasher from the 80s. Pretty popular one, I would say, especially now. That's The Burning from 1981, aka Friday the 13th alternative. No. So I have it on this Blu-ray DVD combo pack, collector's edition from Screen Factory, which is the definitive edition to get of this. It should be available now. I got this over a year ago, so I'm assuming that it's still pretty readily available. But this is great. It has great special features and a nice transfer as well. So yeah, let's talk about The Burning from 1981. We'll start with the setup, the premise, and the cast, and then I'll get into my thoughts and review, which I'm going to try to keep as spoiler free as I can. So, The Burning is a 1981 American slasher film directed by Tony Maylam. Its plot follows a summer camp caretaker who is horribly burned from a prank gone wrong, where he seeks vengeance at a nearby summer camp years later. So that's a pretty basic gist. So basically, it opens one night at Camp Blackfoot. Several campers pull a prank on the caretaker named Cropsy by setting a warm, riddled skull with candles in its eye sockets next to his bed. When the caretaker is awoken by the campers banging on the window, he gets frightened by the skull and accidentally knocks it onto his bed, starting a fire. The flames reach a gas tank, which ignites Cropsy in his cabin. He runs outside engulfed in flames and stumbles down into the river as the boys flee. Despite his horrific injuries, Cropsey survives. 5 years later, he is released from the hospital despite dealing with failed skin grafts and wears a coat and a hat to hide the deformities. A prostitute lures him into her apartment where he stabs her with scissors in a fit of rage. He then arms himself with a pair of garden shears and on another sets out on another summer camp, Camp Stonewater. At the camp, the counselors and campers are playing softball when Tiger, one of the campers, goes to search for a ball lost in the woods. She finds the ball and runs back to the game, narrowly avoiding Cropsey. So yeah, that's the setup and the premise of this movie. Cast wise, we have Brian Matthews as Todd, Keith Mandel as young Todd, Leah Ayres as Michelle, Brian Backer as Alfred, Lou David as Cropsey, Larry Joshua as Glazer, and Jason Alexander. George Costanza himself as Dave. Um, so yeah, that's the setup, the premise, and the cast for The Burning from 1981. This is a really good slasher movie. Obviously, a lot of people have talked about this. It's kind of in the same vein, obviously, as Friday the 13th, camp setting in the summer. The killer on the loose has a different, sort of a different setup, a different story, and everything. And there are some differences with it. So let's just go ahead and get into it, starting with what I like about the movie, my pros. Of course, you got to start with Tom Savini's practical effects. They're at the top. They're top notch, at the top of his game, especially as it relates to a certain scene in the movie, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Very effective and gory. Just practical effects that you couldn't do any better. So glad CGI didn't exist in these days. I also felt like the characters came across as real people, and I highlighted the word real, that most of us can relate to or that we know from school. Doesn't seem like actors so much. We care when they are killed and we feel for them. Now, part of the fact that they don't feel like actors is the acting's not that good. By some of the performers, the main cast is pretty good, I would say. The guy Brian Matthews that plays Todd, Leah Ayres that plays Michelle, and Keith Mandel, or I'm sorry, Brian Backer is Alfred. I think they do a pretty good job, but a lot of the other counselors just feel like real people that they might have pulled from an actual camp, to be frank. So it's kind of a double-edged sword when I say that they feel like real people. They don't feel like actors because some of them aren't that good of actors. But I don't know. They set it up in a way that these counselors are a little bit more believable and a little bit more relatable, I think, to the audience. So that's definitely a plus for the most part. The score and the musical cues used are really solid. It has its own distinct tone, which is effective in my opinion. With all the camp slashers out there, especially during this time, you kind of want to have your own distinct mark, your own distinct signature, if you will. And I think this movie does a pretty good job with that. Um, the weapon Cropsey uses is pretty badass. It's different than the other killers. It can do a lot of damage all at once, especially mass damage, as we see in a certain scene known as the raft scene. Um, yeah, I just really like the weapon that he chose. I don't think there's another killer with those big garden shears like that, and they're pretty unforgiving to its victims. Speaking of the raft scene, it definitely is the highlight of the movie. It all kind of builds up to that, and I don't feel like after the raft scene the movie's ever quite as good. It's kind of like this, and the raft scene's there, and it goes. I'm not going to say it goes like this, but it kind of goes like this. It kind of comes down again. So the raft scene is definitely the scene everybody talks about, and for good reason. So unexpected, especially the first time you see this movie, as they are approaching the canoe on this raft. You're kind of expecting, as I was, and I'm sure a lot of people are, that they're going to find a dead body in there. That's just the obvious takeaway as they're approaching it. You're not expecting Cropsey to be laying down there with the garden shears, waiting to pounce. The brutal kills with a lot of blood and believable gore. Again, going back to the practical effects. It's also an iconic image when Cropsey stands up and he's holding those garden shears up like this in the sunlight. Just one of the great horror images of all time, frankly. Um, I also think the story's pretty interesting. How these young kids do this prank and it ends up going awry and causes these injuries, these burnings to this man, and he's obviously seeking revenge. I know it doesn't seem like that; it's not incredibly creative or anything, but I just thought that they had their own. It's just kind of a different spin with the burning and everything, and I don't know. I liked it. That story kind of worked for me. Again, it's not groundbreaking or incredibly original, but I just kind of liked the beginning, the origins of it. I feel like they did a good job of setting that up too throughout the movie, or at the beginning of the movie to work for the rest of the movie. I thought they took their time introducing the characters and allowing the audience to get to know them, which is rare in a lot of slasher films. This movie actually, like the first 45 minutes of it, actually sets up more like a teen drama, if you will, a camp drama, perhaps, like Poison Ivy or something like that. You actually go like 40, 45 minutes without a killing. And the first 50 minutes, you don't have any killings at this camp, actually. Um, but in turn, they also let us know who these characters are, and yeah, a lot of them are cliche. You have the bully, and you have the girls that aren't very strong and just kind of have to go with the flow, especially during this time. Of course, this movie unfortunately was produced by the Weinsteins, and they definitely have their signature in this movie. That's one of the unfortunate legacy aspects of this movie, especially as it relates to the female cast here and the young women in this movie. But even though a lot of the characters are cliche and not, maybe not what we'd like, we know them. I mean, we can relate to a lot of them. You have the asshole bully, you have the other asshole that's just, trying to force sex on this girl, and when she doesn't, when she kind of shies away from it, he gets pissed at her, and totally Weinstein. Um, but yeah, I thought that was effective to have the audience give a damn about the characters, which just does not happen in a lot of slasher movies. I think the look of Cropsy's pretty effective. Both the silhouette that they use with the black raincoat and the black hat and the gloves, very giallo. I like that when it's sort of kept in the shadows, and then at the end when it's revealed his burned face and everything, I thought that was pretty effective. I thought it was good and believable makeup effects used there. I'm sure Tom Savini had something to do with that. So yeah, kind of a little bit surprising that we didn't get any sequels to this movie because Cropsy he could have been one of those killers that kind of went on and kind of like a Friday the 13th, but I guess it just didn't stick. I mean, it was like 20, 25 years before they even had a decent release of this movie, so I think it kind of got lost and through time. But so yeah, anyway, those are my pros. Getting on to some cons. It's not a perfect movie by any means. It's definitely a more of a slow burner slasher. As I said, about the first 50 minutes of the movie, we don't get any kills at the camp. There's a lot of false scares and almost kills and false kills, things like that. So if you're somebody that's expecting wall to wall kills throughout this movie, you'll probably be kind of disappointed in that regard. Most of the kills happen like in the middle of the movie, a little bit before and after the raft scene. But yeah, like the first Well, there is a kill, but it's not related to the camp. I'll get into that as another con here that I have. I don't think the movie's edited all that well. I didn't care for the edits or the fades to red after the kills, after the raft scene. And there's a couple. Every time there's a kill, they like fade to just like a red screen, and then they go on to the next scene. I just thought that was pretty poorly done, not very well transitioned. I didn't care for that. It felt cheap and it was distracting to me. Also, the ending chase or confrontation that Cropsey has with Todd and Alfred, it goes on way too long. They could have cut 10 minutes off of that. It feels like they're trying to pad the runtime of this movie here. I wouldn't have minded seeing one of those two get killed, maybe as like an act of heroism or something. I think that would have made the ending a bit more effective. But instead, it just kind of drags on with them walking around this old, just like the concrete setting or structure of this old cabin where he got burned in. I thought it was kind of cool that they went back there because that's where it all started. So I give them credit for that. But yeah, they needed to pick up the pace here. It went on too long, and it definitely kind of brought down the movie at the end for me. Cropsey's motivations don't entirely make sense or work either. Initially, he's kind of a sympathetic character because we don't know anything about him. We just know these guys think he's an asshole and they're playing this prank on him, but obviously getting burned, you're until you really know somebody, you kind of feel for him and have sympathy for him. But he goes after these campers that really have nothing to do with what happened to him, and it's just not a very convincing motivation. Now, again, I know this is an '80s slasher film, and I mean, Jason did the same thing. Basically, it's like he had nothing to do with, he basically in the second beginning of the second movie, he took care of Alice, who ended up beheading his mom. And I don't want to get into a tirade about Friday the 13th, but my point is he goes after people that just keep trying to open this camp again. So I guess the motivations aren't that important in that regard, other than he's just trying to keep the camp closed down because he drowned there and his mother was killed there. But I don't know. It just, especially the women in this movie. I mean, what the hell do they have to do with it? These are a bunch of young guys that decided to pull this prank on him and ultimately cause his demise in terms of being burned and injured. So, but he goes after everybody, and this isn't even the same camp that he was burned at. It was across the lake. So I don't know. That just didn't entirely work for me. The scene with the prostitute, and that's the one kill that we get in the first 15, 20 minutes of the movie before we have to wait until like the second third, almost the last third of the movie for killings at the camp. It really had nothing to do with what happened to him. It's kind of pointless, and it just feels like they tried to throw an early kill in there to keep the gore and the kill people happy. It just doesn't fit with the rest of the movie. So that was another con I sort of picked up on. So I don't know, maybe I'm being a little too nitpicky for some people, probably not nitpicky enough for others. I do know there's people out there that think this movie's overrated for all the hype it gets. I don't necessarily know if it's overrated. I think it's rated pretty well for what it is. I think it's a nice alternative to Friday the 13th. I think it kind of fits in with this whole run of camp slashers that they had. But I think this movie works for the most part because of the characters, because of the killer, and mostly because of Tom Savini and the kills and the gore and blood that we get in it. So yeah, I'm going to give this movie an 8 out of 10. It's not perfect, but it is an effective camp slasher that I really enjoyed. I'm really glad that I have it in my collection. So 8 out of 10 for The Burning. Go ahead and comment down below, guys. If you've seen The Burning, what your thoughts about it? Do you like it more than I do? Do you like it less than I do? About as much? Comment down below. Please like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming video reviews for this series. And please be sure to subscribe to my channel down below as well so you don't miss any of my great horror content. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. Have a great day. Stay scared. Bye.